well, talking to people in the community, is there is a lot of congestion on our roads. Perhaps in 74, and even people that live outside of 74, one thing that comes up a lot is River Road, okay? I've even heard on, for Longboat Key and other districts, other cities, it's one of their top priorities that we focus on making sure that River Road gets widened and raised. Now that's supposed to get done in 2024. You know, we're what, now 6 hurricane seasons away from potentially that happening. So one of my priorities, something I would like to work on, is expediting that process. I think that's something we can do at the state level, and that's something I'll work very hard on. And then as far as congestion on the roads, I think, you know, there needs to be better coordination between the Department of Transportation and local city governments. I think that's very important because we do have a congestion problem, and it's only going to continue to get worse if we don't make that a priority. Thank you.
Thanks, James. I'm glad you brought up the expediency, the problems that we have to face, especially when you see, this is a question I have. The question I have is, why is it that the Department of Transportation has to do the construction on the roads right there?
That's a good point too.
Okay. So,
Yeah.
so I just wanted to reiterate that, because I've heard a lot of problems about, you know, transportation and construction jobs and infrastructure. You know, before you have all those 3 entities, okay, we had to do one thing. We had to clean up the water first. We had to clean up the mess, okay? Clean up the mess that the sugar industry destroyed in Florida. Let them pay for it instead of the taxpayers, as far as I'm concerned. Okay, we're paying for everything right now. This is what everybody has to understand. The formula back in 2014 was insurance premiums in municipalities, okay? So they asked me the question, what would you do about insurance premiums in municipalities? I said, let the people vote for it. Let the people have a say-so in the matter. Well, they did it. So this is what they did. They put band-aids in between the insurance premiums and the municipalities, and they want government to control the whole thing. Okay? That's what happened. That's why we're worried of all the red tide, the algae blooms, killing of the fish, everything. We have no quality water anymore. That's why I ran in 2014. Only on water only. Seriously. Then it's all intertwined. Without the water bill, okay, without clean water, I'm worried about the farm bill. I'm worried about SNAP. I'm worried about people getting bad. I'm going to have people with disability going on 15 to, you know, and 18 to 49 going back to work with the disabled. No, they can't work anymore. That's why they were on food stamps to begin with in the first place. So what we yellow have to do is have a common form of camaraderie here. And so who's going to take from where to pay off all this debt from where? Okay. That's all I have to say.
Okay, for the moment.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Well, I'd like to say that I think environmental issues and growth management are one of those issues, sets of issues that really do cut across partisan boundaries. I think a lot of us move to Florida or stay living in Florida and continue to love it because of the beautiful environment we have and the quality of life that we enjoy. And I think we need to make sure that we preserve that for our generation, our generations to come. We do have a lot of growth in Florida, of course. Recent reports said something like 1,000 residents move on a daily basis, the size of the city of Tampa, almost every year. And we have a lot of wonderful benefits from development, but it does, I think it does warrant more oversight, including by the state government. As Representative Margaret Good mentioned in the last panel session too, it used to be that, you know, we had state level oversight to make sure that local governments are actually following through with their plans to have smart growth and growth that goes according to their long-term plans. And so we didn't make sure that these local governments are sticking to their plans and are not being co-opted at the local level by special interests. So I'd like to see, I think one idea is we could think about elevating an agency to, some kind of state level department for growth management again. So we actually have some oversight over that. We need to continue to promote investment in transportation. But we also just need to change the course of where we've been going politically on this issue in terms of domination by special interests that have been hurting our environment, because under decades of one-party rule, we've seen our water quality standards erode. In the last several years, they've cut the budget for even monitoring water quality. And how do we even get a handle on problems like red tide toxic algae if we're not even monitoring it properly? So we need to make sure that those water quality monitoring is in place and properly funded, so we get an understanding of the scope and nature of the problem. I'm proud to say that I was just last night I got the email. I'm endorsed by the Sierra Club, a chapter of Florida, so I'll be a strong champion of the environment in Tallahassee to fight for water quality, stronger regulations for septic tanks, better oversight, better funded water management districts, and make sure that we're fully funding Amendment 1, Florida Forever, for land conservation. Because when we conserve land, we can also help protect critical watersheds from mining, excessive development, and it'll protect all the downstream areas, and it'll help us maintain our estuaries, which are critical incubators for marine life too. So I'm proud to say I'll be a strong champion for the environment and fight against special interests in Tallahassee.
Well, I have bad news. You can't stop growth. As Liv just said, we have basically Sarasota County moving to Florida every year. Growth is going to come. Now, it's going to come. So the question is, it's a little bit rhetorical, but where do you think you're going to have more input? If that control and that growth and that oversight is managed at the county level, where you can go to the county commission meetings and talk to them all the time, or if it's going to be up in Tallahassee. You think you have special interest problems here in Sarasota County or Manatee County? Go up to Tallahassee. The lobbyist buildings are bigger than the Capitol. Pushing our concerns up to Tallahassee and thinking that they're going to solve them and make it better for you here locally is not the right answer. It's very seldom the right answer to say, I want things better, so I'm going to push responsibility and accountability up the chain. No, you want your representatives that control those things closer to you so that you can influence them, so that you can go to those county commission meetings and you can talk to them. That's how you're going to control it. It's not going to get better by pushing it over to Tallahassee, where there's more money and more special interest, talking to your representatives every day.
Okay, I have a lot to say about this, but I'll try to keep it brief. I agree with Tommy in one way, but I vehemently disagree in another way. I think the state does have a responsibility to set floors, and that you can go to your county commissioners to make it better. But we've seen the environmental impact of not having anything from the state over the course of the state. Because the bottom line is, it doesn't just affect, these policies don't just affect Sarasota County. And the blue-green algae that we've seen come out of the Caloosahatchee has to do with statewide policies, so we need statewide solutions to it. On the point that I agree with him, though, is that it's a special interest issue. It truly is. And if you look at the campaign contributions of the various candidates running, you will see where the money comes from. Most of my contributions come from people within the district, small contributions. And my opponent's contributions come from big development and fossil fuel companies. So if you want to control special interests, do research on the candidates and where their money comes from, because that's voter education is where that's going to come from. So, policy-wise, Amendment 1. This is one of the reasons I'm running, is because the Florida voters voted overwhelmingly to pass Amendment 1 by 75%, and yet the Florida legislature has slow-rolled it or not done anything about it, and a judge in Tallahassee just ruled against the Florida legislature. I'm going there to fix that and do what the voters wanted by an overwhelming margin in Amendment 1. So I'll finish with a story, a personal story about how the red tide issue in particular this summer has affected my family. I had my cousin and my cousin's husband are charter fishermen down in Charlotte Harbor, and they have had no charters this summer, not one. He works full-time for Inglewood Glass now because he can't get any charters and they're canceling out to October. That's a tragedy. That's why people move here. That's why people live here. And we can do something about it. The Venice City Council is doing something about it, imposing a fertilizer ban because they recognize the issue. And we can do similar things at the state level. Thank you.
Panel, one of the issues that they all seem to have strong opinions on and that was brought up was the whole correction system, mass incarceration, and our situation there when we consider that we have 100,000 prisoners at 20,000 a year, and it's not hard to do that math. It's a lot of zeros. So, Tony, you lead off and we'll go down the row. And again, be as brief as you can and still say something important.
Yes, okay. I will be brief on this one. I think this is definitely a bipartisan issue that we can come together on and enact reform. One reason is the cost. Geez, until the last panel, I wasn't aware of the enormous cost of that. I knew it cost money, but I saw it, like I said in my intro, from the perspective of an appellate attorney at the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, and I saw these case files and these people who were incarcerated for minor offenses, and it just rolled and rolled and rolled until they were in prison for life. And it you know, to some extent it reflected on them, but to some extent it reflected on the inability to perform the task of rehabilitation. And I think that's where we need to implement diversion programs. I know there's a veterans court that's been passed but not funded. That's sort of a theme we'll come back to for veterans court. But there are definite bipartisan ways we can come together to address this issue and reduce the incarceration of nonviolent offenders.
Years out of my 20 in the Air Force, I was a JAG like Tony. And for my entire 14 years, I was on the prosecution side, so I have quite a bit of experience to talk about the choices that people make that lead them to jail. When you just look at the number, it is certainly, overwhelming to say we have 100,000 people incarcerated in the state of Florida. Incarceration is not the answer to many of our problems. You could ask any law enforcement officer in either one of the counties in our district, and they would say, you can't arrest your way out of the opioid problem. It is not going to work. You can't incarcerate everyone to solve that problem. There are lots of other things we could do. And the bottom line is that the judiciary, especially the criminal justice system, frankly, is the place where people go when all the other programs have failed. We have to have a comprehensive view when we look at it. And I think it was Tracy that mentioned in the first panel, and I agree, Tony, it is bipartisan, but it's a finite number, $89 billion. It's a big number, but it's finite. But we only use 0.6% of the budget to fund the judiciary. We are underfunding the judiciary, and when you do that, you create a backlog which just ripples through. But you've got to remember, we're sending people to jail, and there's 3 reasons for that, for their sentence. One is punishment. Punishment for punishment's sake. The second one is to deter them, not to do that crime again, and deter others. But the third one, and we can't overlook it, we've got to fund it, is rehabilitation. We have to take into account all 3 reasons that we're incarcerating people and make sure that we are addressing each of them in their time in jail.
I think the correction, from looking at the last legislative session, one of the biggest problems that I saw coming out of it was actually this underfunding of the correction system. There was a $28 million deficit in the prison system coming out of the last legislative session. And so they were cutting Florida State prison chaplains and libraries, and it just didn't make a lot of sense to me. These things are important for people to turn their lives around. And they were also cutting jobs in our community and community centers where people were getting treatment for mental health and substance abuse, and because the community centers had their funding cut, the people were getting sent back to prison where you have even higher costs for taking care of these folks and incarcerating them. Florida also leads the nation in incarcerated youth under 18. We spend an incredible amount of money on our prisons, more than the education system. And so we need to, revisit our sentencing laws. We need to look for ways that we can create better balance in what we're doing. And we also need to make sure that we're really looking at mental health as a priority too. We're critically underfunding mental health, and too many of these people are ending up because of mental health or substance abuse problems in the prison system rather than getting the care they need in the community.
Excuse me. I have a problem sometimes with the prison system. And number one, I believe somebody who's running for office, always gets these political contributions from the prisons that don't do their job. So with that being said, I don't know how to handle that situation. But personally, I was a victim of abuse. And my ex-stepson, who was 6'5", 255 pounds, broke my finger, tore my retina, put me in the hospital, and he keeps on going off free. He keeps on going through the hoops. They get out in 2 years or 1 year. And they go out and do their own thing and then beat up on people and come back in the system again. So my goal as a Florida State representative is to make sure these guys stay in and not get out. It seems like to me, and I don't know if I'm wrong or not, it seems like to me that the judges and the criminal system protects the criminals more than they protect us. So if I'm politically incorrect of saying that, so be it. But that's how I feel. And that's you try to teach your kids the right thing, and they don't want to listen. They want to do the drugs. They want to do, they're going to have it their way. They're not going to listen anymore. And that's why they don't go to school. They're on the streets committing crimes. I see it in my neighborhood every day. I see drug dealers in my neighborhood every single day. So it's up to us to be vigilant and let the let the people work with the police and let the people know what's going on. If we don't, we won't be safe. And that's all I have to say about that.
A number of the candidates up here touched on this, but the rehab and rehabilitation is a very important aspect. Some of you may know I'm on the board here at the Sarasota Y, and we have a program called the HIBI program. This is a program for at-risk mothers with kids, and ironically, going door to door, I've run into one or two that actually brought it out that they actually were going through a very tough time, a dark place, and this is a program where some of these mothers are coming off of addiction. They're helping them with the kids into rehabilitation. I think we need more programs like this that are helping our mothers and our people that are addicted not fall into the prison system. As Tommy touched on earlier, 100,000 we have in the prison system in Florida, and the cost associated with that is astronomical. I think that's a travesty. And for nonviolent offenders, I think that's something we need to look at as well. I think that's it.
Thank you. Because we're at a couple minutes after 9 and the Garden Club doesn't really want us here after 9, we're going to go ahead and do our wrap up, but in your little closing statement, if we haven't touched on something you desperately want to say it, but still let's be a little bit brief. Might as well start down there. You've got the mic. As you say, that's how it works.
Okay, I guess that's how it works. So again, I want to thank everyone for coming out and bringing in some important subjects for us. My name is James Buchanan. I'm running for State House in District 74, and I'm asking for your vote here tonight. I'm a father. I'm a husband. I'm someone that grew up here in Sarasota County. I'm a small business owner. And I'm someone that believes strongly that it's very important we get the right elected officials in that are going in for the right reasons. For me, when I think about going into elected office, I think about those kids I went here locally to high school with. I think about my daughter. I think about those future generations. That's why it's so important we get the right elected officials into office. And that's why I'm running for State House. Thank you.
Thank you, Cona, for having me here tonight. My name is Robert Samuel Kaplan. I'm on Facebook. You can friend me. My campaign is a nonprofit campaign. I don't take any money from special interests. I've been doing this on my own since 2014, and I've been fighting the battles and having political discussion with James, his father, Ray. They've been under together. Everybody wants to solve the problem. Everybody wants to have an idea and solve the problem. And I think when you go with Maryland, and Maryland gets ideas, she has some good ideas. I think if Democrats and Republicans just put away their sides of hating each other, we could get things done. And I just hope it comes to that. I'm worried about America. I love America. I love Florida. I love being a part of the political system, but this is my third one, and most likely my last, because it's so hard and grueling, and people don't realize that these guys work so hard during the summer, and they're the backbone of our community. So please give everybody a great round of applause for all the folks that are running, okay?
I'm Liv Coleman, that's L-I-V as in victory, C-O-L-E-M-A-N, and I'm running for Florida State House 73. I'm an educator from a family of educators. I'm running to make Florida Public Schools #1 and also fight for majority priorities in environment for our water quality, environmental protection, smart growth, to make sure we've got common sense gun safety, affordable, universal health care. And I have just thoroughly enjoyed getting out in the community and going to all kinds of different events and knocking on doors and making phone calls and getting to know so many wonderful people. And I'm so grateful for organizations like Cona too, which are bringing people together in not just this forum, but many different forums for candidates and helping us discuss the issues and having these great conversations among people. So I can't thank you enough for being here and sponsoring this kind of outreach. To continue this in Tallahassee, I'd love to come back. And I pledge to actually have a town hall every month, at least, to show my continual commitment to reaching out to constituents, and even when issues are contentious, to continue to do this and make sure that I'm available for constituents, because that's actually when we most need to have town halls and be open and accessible and have a real airing of different views. So again, it's Liv Coleman. I have a website. Feel free to check it out. Social media. I'd love to get to know you and talk to you further, and hope to talk to you more after this evening. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Well, it's easy to identify the problems, and that's usually what comes up in forums like this or in debates. But I want to take a moment to say there are two Republicans up here running, James in 74, and myself at 73, Tommy Gregory. And just stop for a minute to say, okay, we've identified things that we don't like and things we want to fix. But let's not forget, there's a reason 1,000 people a day are moving to Florida. And the reason is we're #1 in a lot of categories already, including higher education, the last 2 years running according to U.S. News and World Report. There's a reason people love us besides, of course, it's the water, of course, it's the environment, of course, it's the weather, but it's also our tax rate. It's also the fact that under Republican leadership over the last 10 years, we cut 5,000 regulations and $10 billion in taxes. People are coming to Florida because we are #1. And the reason we're #1 is because we've had Republicans in the House and the Senate and as the governor. There's a reason that we've succeeded, and it's because of that leadership. But the other thing is, you don't get to pick your problems. We're identifying problems right now, but you're going to elect representatives they're going to serve you, and they're going to address a problem that you don't even know what it is right now. And I would submit to you that I am the right representative for District 73 because I've spent the last 25 years of my life working with and for general officers, CEOs, fighter pilots, sheriffs, even 2 astronauts, 2 4-star astronauts. I can be in the room with anyone and negotiate good solutions. And you know from my experience, I'm not going to back down from anyone. I'm always going to be fighting for the residents of District 73, all of Southwest Florida, and doing everything we can to make sure Florida continues on the path of being #1 across the board.
Well, I don't know that I would tout cutting regulation, given the current environmental situation we're in, as a positive. But I wanted to talk about, somebody asked about teaching history in schools. What I've said from the beginning of this campaign is one of the seminal moments in my life as far as my environmental feelings was when I read Marjorie. We've heard about Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, but if anybody's read River of Grass, I read that. It wasn't required reading when I was in high school, but it should be, because it shows how we have shaped our environment in Florida. And if we don't restore the Everglades and address these environmental issues, then people aren't going to flock to Florida anymore. And that's just a fact. And these are not random things that popped up. This is a direct act of policies that Tallahassee has implemented over the course of 50 years. So I am going to the State House to change that. And I did want to address one quick thing. I know Robert had said something about Republicans and Democrats hating each other. I don't hate anybody on this panel. I don't hate Republicans. I think that I have policy disagreements with them, but I think there's a lot of things that we can work on together. We've discovered some of them tonight, and I will do the same thing in the State House, because the bottom line is, I'm not going to the State House to represent just my donors or even just my voters, but I'm going to the State House to represent all of South Sarasota County. Thank you.
Again, on behalf of Cona, I'd like to thank all of you all for being here. Everybody, I think, learned a lot, and y'all all probably made our choices a little harder when we get to our ballots. Those long ballots that we're going to hate having to wade through. Aren't you glad we didn't ask you to talk about all the constitutional amendments? Thank you all.